mid-range device. This is the charger. It's a 2 amp charger, so they call it quick charge, but basically it's just your average 10-watt charger as usual using USB right there. This is the USB Type-C cable right here. So as you can see, it's got the reversible plug on it, and further down in the box there's a bunch of stuff. So these are just the quick start guides and the typical paperwork. Let me work my way through here. So we have the SIM card tray pick, and in China you also get a cover foil for the Moto M in this case. Yeah, that's pretty much it in the box. There is a special deal they have down there in China right now where you would also get a bunch of headphones from Motorola with the device, but in my case we didn't manage to actually score the promotional stuff. Let's get the device out of its cover foil, and as you can see on the back, it's a full metal unibody design basically, but I'll show you that in 1 second. I have already set this up, been playing around with it a tiny bit. Let me just quickly unlock this right here. So there you go. There we have the Android that's running on here. As you can see from the sides here, if you look closely, you'll notice this has this 2.5D cover glass on here, as is nowadays pretty much common on most devices. It has a 5.5-inch IPS panel in here that's running at 1080p, so that's 1920 by 1080 pixels in this case. There are no capacitive buttons on the front, which is typical or not very common in Chinese phones. They're using the on-screen buttons right here. Down here we have the pretty prominent Moto logo on this device, although it is made by Lenovo in China. Up top you get the front-facing speaker, and right next to that is the brightness sensor and distance sensor plus your 8-megapixel front-facing camera. If we go around the sides, you can see the antenna lines here, and as you can tell, the device is actually a full metal body that is being used here. So they're using these antenna lines. There's no cutouts actually behind this, so this is very well made. The quality is actually pretty much impressive on this device. It has these chamfered edges and this diamond cut that goes around the device right here. You have the volume buttons on the side here and the power button. They are made out of metal, I think, and they're not the best fitting, but they have a good click point to them. And yeah, it's pretty easy to reach them. They also have this texture on the power button right here, so there's a nice feeling to it, and you can actually tell it apart from the other buttons. Going further down, you get a single speaker on the right, I believe, and on the left is just a mock grill where the microphone is housed, and in the middle you will also have your USB Type-C port, which is a USB 2.0 port, so there's not the high speeds that you would be able to achieve with a 3.0 port. In the middle is those two screws that actually make you able to take the device apart. Going over to the left, there's pretty much nothing there except for this dual SIM card slot where you will be able to actually put in not only 2 SIM cards, but you can also, if you want to, put in a memory card to extend the storage. Let me just quickly open this and get this out so you can see it. It's on the left. We have the slot that doubles also as the micro SD slot. I'll just put in a T-Mobile SIM for Germany right now. And there's one thing you have to remember about this device, or at least the Chinese version, is the fact that this only supports Chinese bands, which means you get most bands actually that you would also expect to be using in Europe, for example, but in this case they are limited to band 1, 3, 7, and a bunch of other Chinese bands. And yeah, band 20, which is the one that we use mostly in Germany, is not supported on this device, so you have to remember that if you want to buy this, and you might end up skipping from 3G to 4G from time to time, depending on your network operator or what bands the company uses. In my case, it's T-Mobile on this device right now, so let me just quickly unlock this. There we have it. Once it's unlocked, you will be able to see up here it has 4G, but that's only on this one network operator, mostly slipping back to 3G because the coverage is not very good on the other bands that are not band 20 actually in Germany. Yeah, going back over to this to the rear here, we have the 16 megapixel camera on the back that uses 1 micron pixels, so they're pretty tiny pixels. You will notice that when taking pictures outside, so the lighting is not very good in low light situations, and you will end up with quite a bit of grain there. We have the dual LED flashback here. So it has those two different colors that will be adjusted to make your skin look better, for example. Then we have the fingerprint reader, which is actually very quick. So let me just show you. I'm just going to lock the device and unlock it. And as you can see, it is pretty quick unlocking the device. It's almost Huawei level because Huawei always has pretty much the fastest fingerprint readers as far as I can tell. The whole thing is packaged in this pretty good looking gold casing right here. The only Motorola logo on the back is pretty much the only thing that you will see on the back, because what they've done is they've moved most of the regulatory information over here to the side. So as you can see, there's a bunch of stuff mentioned there. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The whole thing weighs in at 168 grams, I believe, and it is 7.85 millimeters thick, so it's not the thinnest device. You get the MediaTek Helio P15 in here, so that's a faster version of the Helio P10, and I have been running a bunch of benchmarks on here, and I'll try and find my my scores actually, if I can only manage to. That's the hard part about it right now. So I've run Antutu on here, and as you can see, you score just under 54,000 points on this. I've also had 55,000, so it's a typical mid-range result that you would expect from the Helio P15 on here. There's 4 gigs of RAM, and you also have 32 gigs of internal flash storage. So let me just quickly show you how much space is still left. So you end up with around 24 gigabytes of usable storage on this device once you are all set up. Again, it supports AC Wi-Fi. It also has dual band support, so 2.4 and 5 gigahertz bands are supported. LTE up to 300 megabits, depending on what bands are supported in your country. That's the most important part about this device. And yeah, the Moto M is running Android 6.0 in this case. It has this modified UI on here, the Chinese UI, and the Chinese UI means there's a bunch of problems with translation. Actually, you also end up with a bunch of apps pre-installed. For example, Microsoft is putting their apps pretty much front and center on this device, so we have Excel, PowerPoint, Word, Outlook, and OneNote on here. Cortana is not present in this case, also no Skype or anything, which is probably the reason for that is probably regulations in China in this case. The UI is also special in the sense that as this is a Chinese device, there is no Google software on here. I've only installed Photos so far, but other than that, there is pretty much no Google services on here. I was also not able to install any Google services, which, well, kind of sucks, but I hope I get a ROM from the United Emirates, and I hope that, yeah, then I will be able to actually have all the Google stuff supported on here. We have the App Center, which is basically a Chinese app store that Lenovo was pre-installing here. You'll find most of the apps that you would need in here, except for, yeah, all those Google apps, because the Play services are always crashing. Let me just quickly show you that. So this is what I ended up with when trying to install the Google services or Play Store on this device. So far, pretty much no luck. Yeah, but, well, what am I supposed to do? There is all this typical Android stuff in here, so you get the cleaner stuff, the cleaner button down here. You also have this pretty much not very highly modified UI on here, so you get the quick settings up here. It's all in a pretty low DPI setting, actually, so you'll end up with pretty much pretty big icons and stuff. You can't actually change that on here, which is, well, not the best thing to actually happen to me, because I like it when stuff is a bit smaller. There's a bunch of tools pre-installed. You also get these great apps, what they're calling it in a translation. So that's a bunch of Chinese services, for example, Weibo, the mapping service right there, and Alipay, which is also supported before the lock screen on here, so you can pay wirelessly, at least when you are in China. Other than that, the UI has a bunch of different icons on here. You also get this Theme Center app, which allows you to actually change a bunch of, change around on the icons or switch out the the look of the device, or the interface at least, it's all Chinese, so I can't pretty much do anything with it. You're not able to switch around on the buttons down here, so it's a pretty limited UI in this case, at least when you're using it in the Western countries. You also get a Lenovo browser on here, so there's pretty much no Google stuff on this device. But let's just quickly try and check out the camera for a second. So I have this Chupa Chups down here, so it's just my lollipop right there. What's interesting is you always have to agree to a bunch of stuff, so they pretty much granularly allow you to switch around on the UI, and you'll be able to set it up pretty nicely to your liking, dealing with all these presets to give rights to the apps so they don't do anything without your liking. And the camera is actually, well, in bright situations like this right now, it should be pretty much okay. As soon as you start going a bit further down in the lighting, actually you will end up with the device having a bunch of problems there. So if you look at the pictures, yes, this is a 16 megapixel camera. I've set it to the highest resolution right now, but quality could be a bit better. Also, the colors are a bit off because, as you can see, like, it has a blue tint to it, so they might be able to fix that through software. The device only has been out in China for like 2 weeks, I think. And there's a bunch of stuff they definitely need to fix on here. Looking at the camera app, you can also switch to the front camera, which I believe is up here, and then you will see that it has pretty prominently placed down here those beautification stuff, the typical beautification stuff that you always end up on the Chinese devices. The front-facing camera is actually pretty decent because it has this 8 megapixel sensor. Let me just quickly snap a shot right here, and we'll take a closer look at my ugly face, and yeah, you'll see. Well, it's a bit grainy as I'm in the dark right now, but it pretty much works okay. So you should be able to take some pretty decent selfie shots with this. So yeah, that's just been a very quick look at the Moto M, which is actually now out in China. As I said, it's launching in the United Arab Emirates pretty soon, and we'll see how that goes. They said on the Moto site that it was going to be running a Snapdragon 617 or 616, I believe. But that's definitely not the case. This will also run the Helio P15 on the international version that hopefully soon will be out. Before I forget about it, up top we have the 3.5 millimeter headset jack and your noise cancellation mic. And yeah, other than that, it's pretty much a no-frills phone that is definitely of a very high build quality. I mean, it's super stable. You won't be able to bend this in any way. And there's also no flakes on the back, so it feels very sturdy actually. One thing that I'm missing on here is a notification LED. So this device actually does not have a notification LED. At least I haven't found any settings, and all the messages or notifications that I've received have not triggered any notification LED so far. So yeah, that's the one thing that is definitely missing on this device, which is the Moto M. So if you like those kinds of videos that I'm doing, trying to find a bunch of special devices from China or other countries, follow me on Twitter. It's my name basically, Roland Quandt, which is RQUANDT on Twitter. Also follow me on YouTube, and I hope you like what I do, and we'll see you later. The camera on the Moto M is a 16 megapixel shooter that only has a 1 micron pixel size, and does have a 2.0 aperture, which is pretty decent, but you can tell that it has some difficulties using those tiny pixels to actually take decent photos. So talk about the software first. You'll see that we have this triangular measuring tool here, so that helps you keep the phone straight basically. Focus seems to be pretty decent. It's not the fastest. It is face detection autofocus, so there's no laser autofocus on this device, but it's still pretty good. It's pretty quick actually for a device at this price point, so it takes just under a second for the device to focus, but there's a bunch of times when it definitely is having a hard time focusing, especially as soon as the light tends to fade away a little. Feature-wise, you are pretty well set up, so let's switch in here, and you'll see there's a bunch of different modes back here. You can switch around on the resolution. There is a fingerprint shooting option, so as long as if you hold the fingerprint reader on the back, it will take a picture. There's the snapping mode, So you'll have to set up the touch timer, or you can set up a timer. It even recognizes smiles and takes a picture. You can switch to white balance, or you can switch the white balance. You can switch around on the ISO. You can turn it on and off the leveling stuff that I showed you, and you have a bunch of different settings for the grid right there. The video resolution only goes up to full HD. I tend to think that's enough. Video quality isn't the greatest. It basically has the same problems as the regular camera part of the device. There's a bunch of other options, which is pretty nice, is the fact that you can turn off the snap sound, which isn't the most common thing. Well, at least there's a bunch of different manufacturers that do not have this feature. You can use the power buttons to zoom and start sounds, or you can even capture using those buttons. Let's go back out again, because you have a Pro mode down here. So if you pick this menu, you can actually switch to the Pro mode, and that gives you a bunch of options to play around with aperture, ISO, timing and stuff. So yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of options you can use on this device. You can set the focus manually, switch around on the white balance and stuff. So there's a bunch of Pro mode features in here, so those work pretty well. There is HDR on this device, if I could only find it. Let me just quickly go back to the regular camera mode. So there's your HDR stuff. It does tend to blur the photos a bit more than is definitely necessary. And well, overall, I'm a bit disappointed with the camera, because there is devices like the Moto G4, for example, that are not that much better on the spec sheet, at least, or the Moto G4 Plus has the same 16 megapixel camera, at least on paper, but it's definitely a different sensor, and I'll show you why that is in a second. So if we go in here and switch through the gallery back to the low light photos, if you look at these low light photos, you'll notice there's a lot of grain going on there. So this has been shot just having my screen in the background. And as you can see, it does definitely have a lot of issues with noise on this device. Going further, there's a bunch of pictures I took outside, and you'll see that it's really struggling to get anything to look sharp in the background here. Looking at all the writing over there, that's totally blurry, and the stuff, this is actually the area I focused on. So as you can see, there is the software kicking in that's trying to help out a bit and make the photos look a bit better, but all it does is basically it makes it more muddy, and this is definitely not a good camera to be used in low lighting. Let's go further back and try and find a bunch of shots I took in the sun. So this has been this afternoon. I have to admit, Germany or Berlin doesn't get much light these days, because it's winter over here, and yes, it's mostly dark. So this is actually a very famous mosaic that is on a building in the city center, and usually you would be able to see all these tiny tiles that they've used on there to build this. And as this is a 16 megapixel camera, and this is used in the sun, I mean, the sun is strictly straight shining onto that building right there. I'm very disappointed with the image quality on this device, actually, because the software actually makes it all muddy in this case. Looking at stuff that is a bit worsely lit, you'll see this does turn out pretty well, actually. It's more of a contrast thing going on here, so the lines are a bit blurred out, and overall, again, muddy, but still, this is a photo which is not that common on this device that did turn out not too bad. Looking at this photo taken in a supermarket, I noticed that it tends to darken the photos. This has been very well lit, actually, but if you look at the photo right here, it has toned it down quite a lot. And again, the software is kicking in heavily, at least on the picture part of this can right here. So over here, it's all muddy, and the font actually comes out pretty nice. The contrast on the font seems pretty nice. Color-wise, color reproduction isn't the best. It tends to be a bit warm. It switches a lot, around a lot. So the quality could definitely be better. This is another picture from the supermarket. Again, super well lit area, but again, it looks a bit dull and a bit like darkened after. I'll give you a comparison to the Moto G4 Plus in a second. And overall, the camera really seems to struggle with sharpness at a certain distance. So there's only a certain area where the device actually is able to take really kind of sharp shots. Overall, the photos are really not that great at all. I have to admit, I'm coming from a high-end phone, in this case the Huawei Mate 9. This is the Christmas tree in the shopping center there. Over here we have some pretty decent detail on those tree parts there. It looks pretty much okay, at least considering the fact of this being in a shopping center where the lighting doesn't tend to be this great. Looking at this machine at the train station I was at earlier, you'll see that this area right here is actually where I focused, and again it is pretty muddy and it has some serious issues taking decent photos. And on here on this metal part, you'll see that the software is really wrecking the photo base basically, and they're kicking in some heavy algorithm stuff going on there that definitely doesn't help making this picture any better at all. This is a photo taken out in the sun just to try to get this font right. This has been about 1.5 meters away from the from this piece of stone on the wall basically, and again it's very muddy in this case, and the software really doesn't do a good job of keeping these photos in any way usable. Looking at this graffiti, again, same problem. It's all a bit mushed and muddied by the software, I hope, at least, because I'm just really hoping for the international ROM to be a bit better. This has been this afternoon in my city right here in Berlin, and again, same stuff going on back here. This whole tree is just one massive blob of blur and not really a good picture at all. And I've really tried to make the device kind of like at least try and get some good points out of it. And again, looking at this number plate back here, it's all just a huge mess. So let's take a look at the power consumption on the Moto M and its battery charging times. So I've been using this device, or it has been turned on, for just under 20 hours. It was fully charged. As you can see, I did some game testing in the beginning, had it on standby most of the time through the day, and back here is a bunch of more game testing going on, so you can see that the power consumption definitely kills the battery, but that has been some powerful games used there. The device has been on around 250 candela brightness all day, and so far it's managed just over 18 hours, or just under 18 hours of standby time. It has been in use for 2 hours and 45 minutes, as you can also see when looking at the screen on time, basically 2:45. That's as much as I have been able to squeeze out of it. So this will definitely get you through the day if you are not a heavy user. As soon as you are playing games, doing a bunch of stuff online, using the screen at the full brightness, do some GPS navigation and stuff, you will definitely have to recharge this device when trying to make it through the day. Quick charge, as I said, is available. And to give you some context on the power consumption, let's go over to Geekbench back here, which is right there, and let's look at the battery test that I had been running the last couple of days. So this managed to score just under 5 hours on the Geekbench 3 battery test, which is not the best performance, at least when looking at other devices, because right here we have the Moto G4 Plus, which has the Snapdragon 617 in it. Both devices are 5.5-inch Full HD devices. They're pretty similar in a bunch of respects, and as you can see here, even the Snapdragon 617 that is also made at 28 nanometers has been able to score a longer or higher score on the battery test here from Geekbench 3 in this case. Both devices at the same brightness, and as you can see, the MediaTek SoC is just not as power efficient. And taking this test to another level is basically looking at other devices too. So let's look at the Nova Plus from Huawei here. That is running on the Snapdragon 625. It also has a 1080p screen. It has been set to 250 candela when running the Geekbench 3 battery benchmark basically, and this scored just under 10 hours. So as you can see, the new 625, which is a 14 nanometer SoC, just goes to show how much more power efficient the smaller CPU build processes are. So you will definitely, well, experience a much longer runtime on devices that have the more power efficient SoCs, and in this case the Helio P15 from MediaTek just is not one of them. I wish Motorola had gone with the 617, maybe even the 625 from Qualcomm on the Moto M, but this is not the case. They are sticking with the Helio stuff here from MediaTek, which just isn't as power efficient, at least when talking about the 28 nanometer SoCs. There has been a bunch of talk about the Moto M coming out with a 617 in the